If you've been around in the Sims community, when you hear the word brand collab in reference to The Sims 4, you might get a little bit nervous, and that's justified. Look, we don't have a good track record with working with brands in The Sims 4. We've just been burned like 3 too many times. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about why I think that is, like why these collabs are kind of flopping, and also what they could be doing differently that would make them go over a little bit better, because I actually think I have a couple good ideas for collabs that I would like to see, and I can imagine you might enjoy them too. And yes, for this, I have created a presentation. It is called Brand Collabs in The Sims. Katy Perry, please come home. So like I said before, the existing brand collabs, think like the Mosquito Stuff pack, the MAC makeup collab, they were poorly executed. They seemed kind of low effort. And now we've been let down so many times from these collabs that I think the community as a whole is a little bit distrusting of brand collabs. I also said that Katy would be ashamed. Now, I do want to make it clear that when the Katy Perry Sweet Treats came out, none of us were pleased. Katy Perry literally had a stuff pack in The Sims 3 that was more expensive than regular stuff packs, and it was ugly. It was truly horrible, but I look back on that fondly. It was like so bad that it was good, you know? Nobody thinks that about Mosquito Stuff, so let's talk about it. So a couple of years ago, The Sims did a stuff pack called Mosquito Stuff. I call it mosquito, like the bug. That's not the technical term, but I like it better. And this stuff pack was interesting because it added some new clothes, it added a new fashion photographer career, it had some pretty cute furniture, and it changed the way photos work in The Sims 4, which is a thing that I still use like every day in my game. But the collab itself was really odd. So to start us off, when they announced this pack, I'm not kidding, this is one of the top 10 like most awkward moments in my entire life. So I'm gonna paint you a picture, okay? It's EA Play. That's like a little mini convention that EA does. They bring out players, anyone can come for free, they can play their games, and it's a whole thing. And they have some like main stage announcements during EA Play happening, and there was going to be an expansion pack announcement. That's why all of the Simmers were there. They had like flown us out to EA Play in Los Angeles to play the expansion pack early and like be there when it gets announced. They were doing an official live stream. They had us literally in a live audience watching them on a stage about to show the trailer, and they're gonna do this whole big announcement, okay? So they play the Island Living trailer, everyone's freaking out, they're cheering, they're screaming, there's mermaids, we're losing it, right? It was very exciting. We hadn't seen it yet, so it was pretty fun to like see the trailer live and like watch everyone get so pumped about all the new things coming. And then they're like, but wait, there's more. We have 2 more packs for you. And they kind of tease 2 more packs. They're like, we're gonna add magic. Everybody's like, whoa, yeah, magic. They're screaming again. And then they're like, and we're gonna do a collab with Mosquito. The crowd goes silent. So keeping in mind, they had just done like 2 really highly anticipated announcements, and then they go to this one and nobody speaks. Everybody's like, huh? Nobody claps, nobody cheers. They're all like, oh, okay. Oh, it was so weird. It was so weird. And they didn't like tell us anything about it. They just like said the name of it and showed, I think, this icon as well. And I didn't know what Mosquito was. Like so I was like, okay, sure. So the announcement was kind of a flop. I realize a lot of you weren't there for that and probably didn't see that, but that to me, truly, like I said, one of the most uncomfortable things I have ever experienced. I was sitting on the floor in front of the stage, and like me and Sasha and Steph are all together, and we're like, oh, okay, I don't want to think about it anymore. I gotta stop. I can't go back to that place. But anyway, the Mosquito pack for a fashion collab, like it was a collab with a high-end fashion brand. It really added like very little clothing. I feel like the bulk of the pack is in the gameplay and in the build stuff, and that stuff is actually really good, but the clothing kind of sucked. So it was weird that they had this fashion pack that wasn't really about fashion. At least to me, the fashion part didn't seem like a big selling point when it probably should have been the highlight of it. And just in general, I feel like the direction of this pack wasn't clear. Like, I don't really understand it to this day. It seems to me like the higher ups were like, you're doing this collab, and the Sims team was like, we gotta save this somehow, besties. And I think they did, but it was still weird. But really, I think that like the biggest problem with the Mosquito collab was that this brand is not popular or attainable for any of the Sims audience. So when this came out, they released like an official capsule collection on the store's website that had like a bunch of items. Like they had a swimsuit collection, they had a hoodie and a t-shirt, but it was really, really, really expensive. Like the swimsuit, this one was $365. And to be honest, I don't even like it that much. Like this is just not something that I'm going to buy. I am not interested in this at all. And I think the majority of the Sims community was was also kind of like, what is this? Like, we can't afford this. We don't even want this. You might recognize this hoodie because it's also in the game officially. I couldn't find a price to price check this, but I have been making jokes about a $600 hoodie for like 3 years now, so I'm pretty sure this hoodie was $600 when it came out. You can't buy them anymore, but like, who are you selling this $600 hoodie to? Because it's not simmers, right? I mean, there's some simmers that can afford it, but the majority of us have no interest in this. So it just felt really weird. And even now, I just went on their website and Mosquito is doing a big like 50% off sale. Look at this. These items are 50% off. Originally $2,000. Oh, but now it's $1,000. Okay. Like, just as a whole, I feel like this brand and the Sims brand don't align at all. It was an interesting concept, don't get me wrong. I don't think this worked. Especially as like a first collab for The Sims 4. It didn't feel right to me. And then that brings us to the MAC makeup. Personally, I think this collab was worse. I was pretty excited about the concept of it because like getting free makeup in the base game and like a lot of it seemed like a really good thing. And on paper, when you're collabing with a makeup company, it's like, oh, that's awesome. Like, they're gonna be really good, high quality makeup items then in the game, right? And some of them were. We had like some good lipsticks, there's some good neutral eyeshadows, but the eyeliner ruins everything. Here's an article I found titled, "Sperm Be Gone. People hate The Sims 4's new eyeliner." This is what they're talking about. And look, I personally think this eyeliner is a little bit ugly, okay? I'll say it, it's not my style choice. I do think there are ways to make eyeliner like this that are not ugly, but they didn't do that. And also, I think the core of the problem is that this eyeliner is like actually poorly executed in game. This is like bad makeup. It's not well made. CC makeup is like 1,000 times better. Why does it look like that? Why does it distort like that? Why is the texture like that? It's just not a good eyeliner. And that's really confusing. Like, I don't understand why all the makeup in The Sims 4 is so bad. This isn't a problem exclusive to the MAC collab, but like, it's really bad in the MAC collab. So for the most part, a lot of that makeup was like kind of unusable. And I will say, I think that MAC is like a more attainable and more widely liked brand that's also a little bit more affordable. It's kind of expensive still, but it's not like a $600 hoodie expensive. Unfortunately though, MAC tests on animals, which might not matter to you, but matters to me. So I was a little bit disappointed about that. But I think what's worse even than the in-game makeup was the real life makeup. When I call it a low effort flop, you're not gonna believe this. So MAC came out with an official Sims palette. They sent it to me, I have it in real life. It's a little 9 eyeshadow palette. It was $32. The description says, an online only limited edition eyeshadow ×9 palette featuring shimmering smoky brown shades and an exclusive The Sims design. Unfortunately, this palette is not Sims themed. It's an old palette that they put into a new box and sold again. The palette used to be called Solar Glow ×9, and the shades are called Moon Rock, Copper Aura, Blackberry, Sugared, Quarry, Cosmic, Lunar Cycle. This has nothing to do with The Sims. It's just a random old palette that they repackaged. And the box is cool, like it's green on the inside, but that's just a box. On their Instagram, they got some criticism for this. Somebody said, this is a gorgeous neutral palette, but really misses the mark on the Sims brand. Nothing about this feels Sims inspired. That is exactly how I feel. MAC replies, The Sims and MAC have always been about inclusion and creating a fun, interactive environment that allows you to be your true, authentic self. We wanted to offer a versatile palette for everyone, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so is that why you just repackaged an old palette and didn't even come up with like new shade names? This is just so disappointing to me because I feel like there was so much potential with this. They could have made something so interesting. I get it, like I get wanting to have neutrals that are wearable for people, but you didn't even try. This is just a repackaged old palette. I think this makes me feel especially sad after seeing like all the Color Pop collabs and then the Animal Crossing Color Pop collab where they have like all these mini palettes. They've got lip products, they've got glitter, they've got blushes, and it's all in Animal Crossing packaging, and they have these super cute shade names and like Tom Nook's on the little mirror, and it's just so cute. And The Sims could have had this. Like, there's so much potential for like a Bella Goth red lipstick and all kinds of really interesting Sims makeup, and it just didn't happen. And that sucks because I think that this, like a Color Pop version of this, would have done so well for The Sims. And now after the whole MAC flop, like they're not gonna do a makeup thing again. They won't risk that. It's just sad. This makes me feel sad. So like with that all being said, what could they do instead? With those failures, what could they do instead that wouldn't fail? Again, I want to emphasize the attainable, affordable brands. I think that working with high-end companies is a mistake. The primary audience of The Sims is like teenagers and young adults. Obviously people outside of that play the game, but like the majority of the audience is teenagers. And they can't afford Mosquito, nor are they gonna ever want to, probably. So that one just felt really weird and like out of place. I think we're also all looking for more interesting in-game content, things that are both exciting but also usable. Like, I don't really need you to just slap a brand Sims logo on a t-shirt and call it an item. And MAC did have some nice lipsticks they added, but like the eyeliners kind of ruined it for me. I do use a lipstick like all the time on like every sim, I will say that. So I'd like to see more of things like that, things that I can actually use but are still kind of interesting and nice. No animal testing would be ideal in the future. You know, most brands do bad things. We're talking about EA here. Okay, they're not the most popular company either, but maybe like less bad brands would be nice too. And again, I think these collabs are better when they are two-sided, like interesting in-game content and also real life things to purchase that we can actually afford as well, you know? So for example, in The Sims 2, they did an Ikea collab. I thought this was pretty fun. They added a bunch of like actual Ikea furniture into The Sims. I think Ikea is a really good example of like an affordable, attainable, and well-liked company. I think that this really aligns with the target audience of The Sims. I think that we all have some Ikea furniture, I say as I sit at my Ikea desk with my Ikea shelves behind me. And this kind of thing is a good opportunity to add a lot of like useful basics into the game. It can be a stuff pack or a kit or whatever. I wouldn't even be mad. I don't really know like what Ikea would do Sims related in real life. They probably wouldn't, but this is just an example of an older one that I thought went over well. The Sims 2 actually also had an H&M collab, like a fashion stuff pack from H&M. And I've been thinking about this because like, why did they go from H&M to Mosquito? And I think part of the problem is that it's kind of hard to find like affordable and attainable clothing brands that aren't also fast fashion, unfortunately. And so I think that they're like intentionally not working with brands like that, even though that maybe seems like it might align better with their target audience. They're picking like higher end companies like Mosquito or the brand they work with for the modern menswear kit because they're trying to avoid that fast fashion thing. And to be honest, I'm not really sure of the solution to this. I think I would rather have them not collab with fashion brands than do like another Mosquito. If they're gonna do fashion collabs, I'd love to see like some free game updates like that. I do think that kits are also maybe a good place to do this. Like honestly, I thought the modern menswear kit wasn't even bad. With that kit, they work with a real designer from the UK to like add some of those clothing items into the game. And I think that's kind of interesting, especially because it's like a smaller brand. It's an interesting designer. I think that feels a little bit better than the Mosquito thing. And again, if we're gonna get collabs like this, like with clothing companies, I would love to see some like official Sims related merch in real life, but like more affordable merch that isn't like a $600 freezer bunny hoodie. Or even if they like made some Sims clothing in real life or something, like I just want to see a bigger collab basically. Like it's nice to have IRL items in the game, but what if we did the opposite and added some game items in real life? I don't know. What company would be down to make that? Probably none. It just would be cool. I do have what I think is a really good idea for a brand collab. Hear me out. Monopoly. It checks all my boxes. It's affordable. It's attainable. It's well liked. They do loads of brand collabs already. Like I've seen Fortnite monopolies. They've got Star Wars monopolies. This is a Fall Guys monopoly. The Sims is literally about money and it's a money game. The land grabs are like shaking right now thinking of them being over here on the blue spots. Can you imagine it? We also used to have more board game type stuff in the older Sims games and we don't really have that as much anymore. Like we do have Don't Wake the Llama and stuff, but picture this, but your Sims are playing real Monopoly. Wouldn't that be so cool? That just seems like a really obvious, like here's the board game in real life, here's a mini version in The Sims. And there's like so much tech focus in The Sims 4. I'd love to get back to some basics, like of just playing board games with your family instead of only playing video games. They did a lot of like throw away newspapers, throw away landlines, get rid of the old, in with the new in The Sims 4, but I would love to go back to some like classic things like board games. I love board games in real life. Give me more in the game. And again, this is a really interesting, tangible item for both The Sims and real life. Like I would love to have a Sims Monopoly just as a collector's item, but it would also be super fun to play. And you know what? Like there's so much Sims lore. You could fill up the board so easily. I feel really passionate about this. I'm not gonna lie. I am obsessed with the concept of Sims Monopoly now. I want it really bad. Another concept is pop figures. It's kind of similar in that like the Funko Pop brand collabs with lots of different things like TV shows and other games to make their little pop figures. But picture like little figurines of like Bella Goth, the Grim Reaper, Bob Pancakes, a cow plant. Like in this one of Bob Ross, he's holding a little palette, but like imagine Bob Pancakes in his little robe holding like a coffee cup or a plate of pancakes or something. And then we could get those little figurines as like in-game items to put on your Sims shelf. And like I said, Funko's entire brand is like all collabing with people to make like merch of things. So they'd probably be down to do this. And I think that a lot of people would love this. Like people love little nerdy collectible things like this. And we don't really have that much of stuff like that for The Sims. It feels like a really good niche to get into. Like there's not a lot of stuff for The Sims. Give us more stuff. And then I was thinking, what about some sort of like Target collab? This is kind of going down that like stuff line where I'm looking to see more merch. Now The Sims already actually has a merch store on Threadless. They have like loads of official merch. And I think that like the Sims team has been designing these things themselves. A lot of it is really cute. I think you'd like this store. I'll actually link it down below. But like, it's not really well known or widely talked about. And other games like Minecraft and Fortnite, you can buy their merch like anywhere. There's Minecraft stuff everywhere. I feel like The Sims could be cashing in on that more, and I would eat it up. I will buy more Sims merch. And I feel like if they had some sort of like Target collab or like some other, store, they could do some like cute clothes, some official Sims merch that you can just buy in store easily. Maybe like some posters, some prints. I have Sims posters. These posters behind me, you might recognize those from City Living. You can actually find them in game, like when your Sim goes digging around for posters. But I didn't buy those. They gave me prints of them when I went to the City Living Sims camp a few years ago. So I don't think they sell them anywhere. But that kind of thing is really interesting. And they don't like scream Sims. Obviously one of them is Bob Pancakes and one of them is Bella Goth, but it doesn't like scream Sims merch, but it's a cool like Sims collectible. They could do like plushies, pillows. I was thinking like plates or like a mug or like glassware that you can buy. I don't know. I'm being a little bit dramatic about merch here, but I feel like there's a need, okay? Anyway, those are just my ideas for collabs. Obviously, there are a lot of factors at play here when it comes to like a mega company like EA collabing with people, but I do think they could be doing better. So to break this down, what do I think would go over well with the community when it comes to brand collabs? What is my advice to The Sims for this? Number one, again, I think the brand needs to align well with the Sims community. Ideally, like the brand's audience and our audience would kind of match up, attainable and affordable, preferably. It doesn't have to be something fancy, like some really fancy, expensive hoodie. Nerdy stuff is always good. Again, think like little collectibles instead of like high-end clothing. I really do think the pop figures are a good idea, and those aren't expensive. Like I'm looking at the website right now, and this Beauty and the Beast one is $12. That is a lot better than a $600 hoodie. I keep saying it, but I'm serious. And I also think that IRL part of the collab needs to actually be interesting. It's always fun just to get more in-game content, but it's kind of cool when like the other side also does something. I know I keep bringing up the Mac thing, but it's a real shame that the palette was such a flop because this could have been so cool. And in the future, I'd love to see this have more effort put into it, And I also think that it's important to give us like something new in-game, not just recolors of t-shirts. So remember when they did that Sim Sessions like music festival last summer? That was so cool. They had like real celebrities record their songs in Simlish, and they had like a 1 week long only festival in game. And like the artists had official Sims merch, but it was just like a recolor of a base game t-shirt. And I get it, it's just a t-shirt, like what more are they gonna do? But I'd like to see like a new kind of shirt instead of just a recolor of the base game one, especially if they're gonna do like a big old brand collab. And I hate to say it, but I do think kits might be a good place to do more brand collabs. I don't know if they actually will do them, nor do I really want them to do kit type collabs. Like I'm looking for more small collabs like Funko Pops and not like big giant fashion kits, But I do think that since it seems like kits are here to stay, that isn't the worst place to do things like this. Like for example, I think Mosquito Stuff may have been better suited for a kit than a stuff pack. But with that, my presentation is over. I will leave you with this picture of Monopoly because I am still like daydreaming about this. You have to agree, right? Like some of you are into this too. Are we on the same page? Because I would love this. And if you like to just talk about The Sims, I make a lot of videos like this, so I can link some down below, but you can also feel free to subscribe. And with that being said, I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye, everybody. I feel like this video is gonna seem like an endorsement of brand collabs, but surely the beginning has made it clear that I don't necessarily endorse them, right? I called them flops. That's enough, right?